6 a.m., waist deep in my own lake, chainsaw roaring, cutting down no trespassing signs that appeared overnight on my property. The smell of gas fumes cuts through morning mist as I rip through metal posts I definitely didn't plant. 8 months of backbreaking work. 67 grand of my inheritance. 47 acres of rotting swampland transformed into crystal paradise where families fish and kids swim. Then this bleached blonde HOA president rolls up in her pristine white BMW with a sheriff's deputy, claims my entire lake belongs to her neighborhood association, not just part of it, every single acre, says I've been trespassing for months while she watched me bust my ass daily. I was ready to lose my mind. But here's what this Karen didn't realize. I had every receipt, every permit, every single piece of paper that would turn her power trip into a legal nightmare. What would you do if someone tried to steal your life's work? Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and share your own HOA nightmare stories. 6 months before this, Karen tried to steal my lake. I was Dex Romano 52, divorced, and angrier than a wasp in a paint can. 23 years wiring houses in Bakersfield, living in a studio apartment where the HOA had 27 pages of rules about everything from doormat colors to the exact shade of beige allowed on window treatments. My marriage died the same week my grandfather's construction business finally sold. She got the house, the boat, and my sanity. I got my tools, a pickup truck, and $180,000 from Gramps' estate. The most money this working-class Italian had ever seen. I was scrolling through rural property listings at 2 a.m., fueled by cheap whiskey and spite, when I found it. 47 acres in Shasta County, with what the listing generously called a recreational lake. The photos looked like a crime scene: brown water, thick as chocolate pudding, dead cattails, and a dock that had clearly given up on life sometime during the Bush administration. The smell hit me from 50 yards away during my first visit. Stagnant water mixed with rotting plants and something that might have been a family of skunks. But underneath the disaster, I saw bones of something beautiful. The county auction paperwork mentioned it was a bass fishing hotspot in the 80s before some hermit named Eddie Kowalski let it rot for decades. I bid $127,000, won it that afternoon. The first 4 months nearly killed me. I rented dredging equipment that sounded like Satan's lawnmower, and worked dawn to dusk pulling decades of muck from the bottom. The diesel fumes and decomposing plants became my personal cologne. My hands looked like raw hamburger from constant moisture, but slowly, miracle of miracles, the water cleared. Here's a knowledge nugget that saved my ass. Moving water stays clean water. I installed solar-powered aerators that prevent algae blooms and create oxygen for fish. One circulation system beats thousands in chemical treatments every time. By month 6, I had 8 feet of crystal clear water. Bass appeared from nowhere. Fish find good water like bloodhounds find bacon. Weekend families started asking if their kids could swim in the shallow, sandy area I'd created. The crunch of gravel under their tires became my favorite sound, proof that people actually wanted to visit something I'd built. Miguel Santos, a fishing guide from town, brought paying clients on weekends. Sarah Chen from the high school started bringing biology students for water quality tests. For the first time since my divorce, I felt like I was building something that mattered instead of just fixing other people's electrical disasters. That's when the devil in designer sunglasses showed up. Brenda Kowalski, 59, bleached blonde helmet hair, and the kind of entitled attitude that makes you understand why people become hermits. She rolled up in her pristine white BMW X5 on a Tuesday morning like she owned the place, clipboard in hand, ready to inspect my life. I was replacing dock planks when her car door slammed. Not closed, slammed, like she was already furious about my existence. She marched across my property line without invitation, designer heels clicking on my gravel like a death march. "Excuse me," she announced, not asked. "I need to verify your permit status for this water management operation." I straightened up, holding my drill like a weapon. "Ma'am, this is private property. You need permits to be here." Her laugh could have stripped paint. "Oh, honey, that's where you're wrong. This entire watershed falls under Shasta Highlands HOA Environmental Oversight. I'm Brenda Kowalski, Association President, and you've been operating without proper authorization." She pulled out a folder thick as a phone book. Official letterhead, legal stamps, the works. My blood turned to ice water as she smiled like a shark that just found a wounded seal. As of today, you're in violation of community lake management protocols. Cease all activities immediately, or face fines starting at $2,500. She dropped a citation on my dock like a gauntlet. This is just the beginning, Mr. Romano. Watching her BMW disappear down my driveway, I realized I wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor. This was war. Brenda's first move hit me like a bureaucratic tsunami. Within 48 hours, I had 3 different government agencies crawling over my property like ants on a dropped ice cream cone. Monday morning, Fish and Game Inspector at 7 a.m. with complaints about unauthorized habitat modification. Tuesday, Water Quality Board sending some college kid to lecture me about disrupting protected wetland ecosystems. Wednesday, County Planning rolling up with a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets. Each inspector looked more confused than a tourist asking for directions in downtown Bakersfield. The Fish and Game guy kept scratching his head. "Sir, this is the cleanest lake I've seen in Shasta County. What exactly am I supposed to be citing you for?" But they all sang the same tune anonymous complaints from a concerned citizen at Shasta Highlands claiming I was destroying sensitive habitat. The rumble of diesel trucks became my personal alarm clock, announcing another day of government harassment. Here's what made my blood boil. I was following every damn rule. Dredging permits, water rights documentation, environmental assessments that cost me $4,000. But Princess Brenda was weaponizing bureaucracy, filing complaint after complaint, knowing that even bullshit allegations require official investigation. County Planning Inspector Rodriguez finally cracked. "Between you and me, the lady filing these complaints doesn't know squat about environmental law. She keeps babbling about community water resources like you stole the town swimming pool." Time to return fire. I spent Saturday buried in the county recorder's office, surrounded by file boxes that smelled like old cigarettes and broken dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps while I excavated decades of property records, hunting for Brenda's weak spots. What I found was pure dynamite. Eddie Kowalski, Brenda's dear departed uncle, had built this lake in 1962 as part of a gravel mining operation. The original permits were right there in faded carbon copies, complete with environmental assessments from when JFK was president. No protected wetlands, no endangered species, just a man-made settling pond for mining sediment. But here's the beautiful irony. When Shasta Highlands got developed in 1998, they'd skipped the watershed impact study entirely. 25 years of their storm runoff, lawn chemicals, and street salt had been poisoning my lake, creating the toxic algae that killed the fish population. Knowledge nugget that saved my ass. California requires environmental impact studies for any development affecting water drainage. Skip this step, and you're liable for cleanup costs potentially decades later. One missing permit can cost millions in remediation. I photocopied everything, then filed counter complaints that would make Brenda's head spin. Monday, called Fish and Game about illegal runoff from Shasta Highlands contaminating fish habitat. Tuesday, reported unpermitted storm drainage to Water Quality Board. Wednesday, filed formal complaint with county planning about subdivision violations. Thursday morning, I watched through binoculars as government trucks invaded Brenda's pristine neighborhood. Inspectors checking storm drains, testing runoff, asking very pointed questions about environmental compliance. The taste of revenge was better than my grandmother's marinara sauce. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. "Mr. Romano, this is Janet Patterson from County Planning. We need you and Mrs. Kowalski at a boundary clarification meeting Tuesday. There's significant confusion about property lines in our records." My stomach dropped to my boots. What kind of confusion? The 1962 survey conflicts with the 1998 subdivision plat. Different boundaries, different water rights. We can't process any more permits until this gets resolved. I hung up with sweaty palms. Boundary disputes meant legal limbo, potentially years of frozen development, while lawyers got rich arguing over survey stakes from the Nixon administration. But when I called Miguel Santos, the old fishing guide just chuckled. "Amigo, you're thinking like prey. If they're confused about where your property ends, they're also confused about where her authority begins. This lady just handed you a loaded gun." That weekend, I organized every document like I was preparing for war. Permits, photos, environmental reports. Evidence that my lake restoration was the best thing to happen to this watershed since the invention of water filters. Monday night, I got intelligence from an unexpected source. Tom Martinez, who'd done electrical work in Shasta Highlands, stopped by with beer and gossip. "Dex, you're not going to believe this. That Kowalski woman's been calling emergency HOA meetings trying to get the board to approve $25,000 for legal consultation. Half the residents are asking why their fees might go up because of some lake they've never seen. Mini twist time. Brenda's own neighbors were starting to question her expensive obsession with my property. Tuesday's meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. I arrived early, armed with enough documentation to choke a government mule. Brenda showed up 15 minutes late, looking like she'd been sucking lemons for breakfast. What I discovered in that stuffy government conference room would turn her little power trip into my biggest advantage. The boundary meeting ended with legal limbo, but Brenda had a backup plan that hit me where it hurt most: my wallet and my reputation. Within a week, she launched a social media blitzkrieg that would make campaign managers jealous. Concerned Citizens Against Illegal Development appeared on Facebook overnight, complete with professional graphics and photos that told lies smoother than a used car salesman. The pictures were propaganda masterpieces. My dredging equipment positioned next to protected wetlands signs that sprouted overnight like poisonous mushrooms. Muddy water shots from week 1 of restoration, labeled as ongoing environmental damage. My solar aerators described as unauthorized industrial equipment destroying natural habitat. The comments section reeked of manufactured outrage. Stock photo avatars named Concerned Mother Sarah and Longtime Resident Bob posting identical rants about outsiders ruining our community. The AstroTurf was thicker than my ex-wife's lawyer bills, but Brenda's masterstroke was recruiting 3 actual Highlands residents people who'd never seen my lake but loved feeling important. They became her missionaries, spreading gospel about environmental violations and illegal construction at every coffee shop and grocery store in town. The financial pressure hit like a kidney punch. Martinez Electric, where I'd shopped for 20 years, suddenly required double deposits due to regulatory concerns. The equipment rental guys started demanding cash up front plus environmental liability insurance that didn't even exist. My bank froze the construction loan faster than a popsicle in January. I sat in my truck outside Ace Hardware watching the owner duck behind his counter to avoid eye contact. The smell of my own failure mixed with exhaust fumes and the bitter taste of wondering if this fight was worth losing everything. That evening, I stood on my deck listening to aerators hum peacefully while bass jumped in golden sunset light. For the first time since my divorce, I considered surrender. Maybe I should sell this dream and find somewhere else to build my peace. That's when I heard voices carrying across the water. 3 families had parked by the access road, kids running around with fishing poles, parents setting up folding chairs like they owned the place. I walked over expecting to politely ask them to leave. Instead, Maria Gonzalez from Redding thanked me with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Romano, my kids beg to come here every weekend. They've never caught fish before, and my daughter actually put down her phone to watch a sunset." Her husband Carlos grabbed my hand like we were old friends. "Brother, this place is pure magic. Clean water, healthy fish, safe for families. For whatever you're doing, don't stop." That's when the strategy hit me like lightning. Saturday morning, I posted a simple sign: Lake Restoration Educational Day, free family event, learn about water conservation. I called Miguel Santos, Sarah Chen, and every family who'd been visiting regularly. 53 people showed up. Parents drove from Chico. Miguel demonstrated catch and release while Sarah explained how aerator systems create healthy ecosystems. Kids who normally lived attached to smartphones spent 3 hours learning to bait hooks and identify fish species. The sound of children's laughter echoing across clear water was better than any revenge fantasy. But the real victory was spotting that familiar white BMW parked on the property line, engine running, windows tinted darker than Brenda's soul. She sat there like a surveillance operative, watching families enjoy something she'd tried to destroy. Late afternoon, Martha Pina, 78-year-old retired librarian whose family had lived here since dirt was invented, approached with a weathered photo album clutched against her chest. "Young man, I recognize this lake from my childhood. My daddy helped dig it back in '62. She opened to a faded black and white photograph showing dozens of people celebrating the grand opening. "But look at the background." My heart stopped. Behind the 1963 crowd stood a large wooden sign: "Future site of Shasta Highlands development, coming 1995. And there, barely visible among the onlookers, was a young woman with distinctive bleached hair, arms crossed, scowling at the camera like someone had personally insulted her mother. "That's little Brenda Kowalski," Martha continued, tapping the photo with her gnarled finger. Eddie's niece. When her daddy sold the development rights in '95, she pitched a fit that could be heard in Sacramento. Said this lake should stay in the family forever, that outsiders would ruin everything her uncle built. The pieces clicked together like a perfectly tuned engine. This wasn't about environmental protection or HOA authority. This was a 30-year family grudge, nursed through decades of watching her lake from a distance, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim what she'd always believed was rightfully hers. Brenda hadn't discovered my property dispute. She'd been planning this takeover since the Clinton administration. Understanding Brenda's 30-year obsession should have prepared me for what came next. It didn't. The certified mail arrived Tuesday morning like a legal grenade in my mailbox. Thick envelope, Sacramento return address, the kind of official correspondence that makes your bowels clench before you even break the seal. Masterson, Craig & Associates was embossed across letterhead thick enough to stop bullets. These weren't small-town lawyers charging by the handshake. This was a white shoe firm that represented half the developers in Northern California, and probably owned the other half. The cease and desist letter read like a declaration of war written in legal hieroglyphics. According to their exhaustive investigation, I was trespassing on designated common area amenities belonging to Shasta Highlands Homeowners Association. They demanded I immediately halt all unauthorized improvements to HOA recreational resources and pay $50,000 in damages for diminished property values and community disruption. $50,000. I read it 3 times while my coffee turned bitter as my prospects, the taste of legal intimidation coating my mouth like medicine nobody wanted to swallow. Here's what made it brilliantly terrifying. They weren't claiming I'd stolen the lake. They were arguing that my restoration work had improved HOA property without permission, making me liable for unauthorized construction costs, like I'd renovated someone else's kitchen and now owed them rent for using better appliances. My lawyer shopping expedition lasted exactly 4 phone calls. The good attorneys either had conflicts of interest or suddenly developed scheduling problems that would last until the next ice age. Peterson from Anderson gave me the brutal truth over crackling phone lines. Dex, Masterson represents 3 major development companies up here. I take your case, I lose half my practice. You understand, I understood perfectly. Brenda had hired legal muscle that made small-town lawyers soil themselves. That night, sitting on my deck listening to the gentle hum of aerators, I seriously considered surrender for the first time. 50 grand would bankrupt me, but fighting might cost twice that with no guarantee of victory. Maybe it was time to cut my losses and find somewhere else to build my peace. By Saturday, I was camping in the county law library, surrounded by books that smelled like judicial defeat and broken dreams. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, while I taught myself property law that normally required 3 years and $100,000 in student loans to comprehend. California property law makes quantum physics look like tic-tac-toe, but I discovered something beautiful buried in the civil code. HOA claims to water rights require dual recording county level and state water resources board. Miss either filing and your claim is legally worthless. I pulled every document related to Shasta Highlands, incorporation papers, subdivision plats, HOA registrations, cross-referencing like I was hunting war criminals instead of property boundaries. Then I struck gold. The 1998 boundary adjustment giving HOA authority over my lake was recorded with the county but never filed with the state water board. In California, that's like buying half a lottery ticket looks official until you try to collect. But here's the beautiful irony. I'd been paying property taxes on this HOA land for 8 months. County tax records don't lie, and they don't care about your legal theories. They want money from whoever claims ownership. Knowledge nugget that saved my financial future. Water rights require separate state-level documentation in California, independent of land ownership records. One missing filing can invalidate decades of property claims. I was organizing this ammunition when Miguel Santos called with information that changed everything. Amigo, you need to meet Harold Brennan. Retired judge, lives in Palo Cedro. Spent 40 years handling property disputes before they forced him into retirement. Guy hates legal bullies more than week-old sushi. Judge Brennan answered his door looking like Hollywood-ordered distinguished magistrate, white beard, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of calm authority that made you stand straighter without thinking about it. His kitchen table was surrounded by law books that smelled like pipe tobacco and decades of judicial wisdom. He read Masterson's letter while chuckling like someone had told him the world's best lawyer joke. Son, I've watched this firm operate for 20 years. They're masters at intimidating people who can't afford to fight back. But they've made 3 amateur mistakes in this letter that would embarrass a paralegal. He pointed to specific paragraphs with a finger that had signed thousands of court orders. They're claiming damages without proving ownership, demanding payment without establishing jurisdiction, and threatening litigation without proper legal foundation. This isn't legal strategy. It's expensive intimidation wrapped in Latin phrases. The judge leaned back, eyes twinkling with the kind of mischief that comes from 4 decades of watching overconfident lawyers step on legal landmines. Mr. Romano, how would you feel about turning their intimidation into our counterattack? Because I know exactly how to make Masterson, Craig, and Associates regret taking this case. He pulled out a yellow legal pad, already sketching what looked like a battle plan that would make generals proud. Judge Brennan's counterattack started with something I never expected: financial forensics. Son, when someone throws expensive lawyers at a simple property dispute, follow the money. Always follow the money. 3 days later, surrounded by HOA financial statements in the judge's kitchen, we hit pay dirt that made my head spin. Shasta Highlands was broke. Not just tight on cash, absolutely screwed. $340,000 behind on infrastructure bonds, specifically for stormwater management systems they'd promised homeowners but never built. They'd been juggling payments like a carnival act, using resident fee increases and creative accounting to avoid bankruptcy. But the real bombshell was buried in their original development contracts. Legal obligation to provide recreational amenities, including a community lake with an estimated construction cost of $600,000. My coffee mug hit the table hard enough to rattle the windows. Judge Brennan chuckled at my expression. Now you see the game. They never planned to build that lake too expensive, too complicated. But if they can steal your restored lake and call it an existing HOA amenity, they satisfy their legal requirements without spending a penny. The scheme was beautiful in its evil simplicity. Let some sucker buy the property at auction, spend months and thousands improving it, then swoop in with legal claims once the hard work was finished. My $67,000 in restoration costs would solve their $600,000 problem. I found the smoking gun in HOA meeting minutes from 2019. The ink faded, but the intent crystal clear. Board exploring cost-effective amenity solutions. Brenda's handwritten notes in the margins were barely legible. Romano property acquisition target identified. She'd been stalking my property since before I even knew it existed. The timeline clicked together like puzzle pieces soaked in betrayal. County auction listing appears, cash buyer swoops in, months of expensive improvements, then mysterious HOA claims surface. Classic bait and switch, executed with government authority and lawyer intimidation. This is straight-up fraud, I said, feeling anger replace confusion for the first time in weeks. Attempted fraud, the judge corrected, tapping the evidence with his pen, with documentary proof of premeditation. But here's what changes everything. They need your lake more than you need to avoid this fight. He spread financial documents across his table like a poker player revealing a royal flush. Brenda's HOA is facing infrastructure payments they can't make, resident lawsuits over amenities they haven't delivered, and property values that will crater if homeowners discover the truth. Without your lake, they're looking at bankruptcy or fee increases that'll make residents revolt. The power had completely flipped. I wasn't some victim defending his property. I was holding cards that could save or destroy an entire development. So what's our play? Judge Brennan's grin could have lit up downtown Sacramento. We stop playing defense and go full offense. Quiet title action to settle ownership permanently. Countersuits for harassment, defamation, and business interference. Property tax reimbursement since they claim to own land you've been paying taxes on. But his final suggestion was pure genius. And we mail copies of their financial records to every homeowner in Shasta Highlands. Let them discover why their HOA president is spending their money on lawyers instead of fixing potholes. Nothing destroys a neighborhood dictator faster than their own people learning the truth. The smell of pipe tobacco mixed with the intoxicating scent of turning tables. For the first time since Brenda planted those trespassing signs, I wasn't running scared. I was about to become the nightmare she never saw coming. Judge Brennan's kitchen became our war room, and within a week, it looked like mission control for an operation that happened to involve property law instead of rocket science. The legal strategy session lasted 6 hours and consumed enough coffee to fuel a cross-country trucker. The judge mapped our multi-pronged attack with the precision of a chess master planning checkmate in 12 moves. Primary objective: quiet title action to settle ownership definitively. Secondary targets: harassment, defamation, intentional interference with business. Nuclear option: criminal referral for attempted fraud. He tapped each item on his yellow legal pad like a general briefing special forces. The best defense against bullies is overwhelming offense, and we're about to become very offensive. But righteous anger doesn't win lawsuits, evidence does. We needed allies, documentation, and enough ammunition to bury Masterson, Craig, and Associates under facts they couldn't lawyer around. Martha Pine became our historical weapons specialist. At 78, she had more connections than a telephone switchboard and twice the determination. Her call to the Reading Record Searchlight yielded immediate interest. Reporters love David versus Goliath stories, especially when Goliath wears designer sunglasses and drives a BMW. "Honey, I've been waiting 60 years for someone to knock the Kowalski family down a peg," she said while organizing documents that smelled like decades of careful storage. "That girl's been acting like she owns this county since she learned to walk in high heels." Tom Martinez brought intelligence worth more than gold. The contractor had wired half of Shasta Highlands and overheard enough board meetings to write a book about HOA dysfunction. Decks, they're hemorrhaging money, deferred maintenance for 3 years, roads cracking like broken eggshells, storm drains that couldn't handle a light drizzle. Brenda keeps talking about legal expenses requiring fee increases, but nobody knows she's spending their money trying to steal your lake. Sarah Chen provided scientific artillery that would obliterate environmental claims. Her water quality tests showed my restoration had transformed the entire watershed healthy habitat where toxic death had reigned for decades. Miguel Santos became our economic warfare specialist. His fishing guide connections throughout Northern California documented families driving hours to visit my lake, local businesses seeing weekend revenue jumps, outdoor recreation returning to water that hadn't supported a minnow in 20 years. Brother, you didn't just save a lake. You created jobs, brought families together, and made this whole region better. We're going to make sure every politician and reporter knows it. Technical preparation required NASA-level precision. Professional boundary survey, $3,200 to settle property lines with GPS coordinates and legal descriptions that would survive nuclear war. Independent water quality testing, $1,500 for lab results showing dramatic environmental improvement. Knowledge nugget that became our foundation. Environmental claims require scientific evidence, not legal opinions. Actual data beats expensive theories every time in court. The media strategy developed like a perfectly orchestrated campaign. Martha's newspaper contact specialized in exposing government corruption. Sarah pitched environmental blogs about successful habitat restoration. Local TV showed interest in the human angle. Divorced guy rebuilds life by saving dead lake, gets attacked by neighborhood tyrant. Community support surprised everyone, including this cynical electrician. Anderson Coffee Shop's Save Dex's Lake jar raised $4,300 in 2 weeks. Contractors offered free labor for final improvements. The credit union provided litigation financing with terms so favorable it felt like legalized charity. But our secret weapon emerged from enemy territory, an anonymous Shasta Highlands resident feeding us internal documents. Board meeting recordings, financial spreadsheets, email chains between Brenda and her expensive lawyers. Somebody inside her own kingdom was committing treason. 3 board members are ready to revolt, our deep throat reported through encrypted messages that made us feel like international spies. Legal costs hit $30,000, and residents are asking why swimming pool repairs got postponed while the Queen hired Sacramento lawyers to fight some guy they've never heard of. The smell of victory mixed with Judge Brennan's pipe tobacco as we surveyed our assembled evidence. Survey maps covered his kitchen table like battle plans. Financial documents revealing HOA desperation. Scientific proof of environmental success. Media contacts ready to tell our story. Community support that made this bigger than one man's property dispute. "Look at this," the judge said, gesturing at our wall of documentation like a proud father. "We're not just defending your lake anymore. This is about whether bullies with expensive lawyers can steal what doesn't belong to them." I stood back, amazed at what we'd built in 1 week. A month ago, I was a divorced electrician trying to find peace by a quiet lake. Now I was leading a coalition that included retired judges, environmental scientists, local business owners, and underground resistance fighters from enemy territory. "Judge, we're not just ready for battle," I said, feeling confidence I hadn't experienced since my grandfather taught me to wire a house. "We're about to remind Brenda Kowalski why you should never underestimate people fighting for what's right." Armed with evidence and allies, I thought we'd gained the upper hand. I was wrong. Cornered animals fight dirtiest when they're about to lose everything. The sabotage started small, just weird equipment malfunctions that felt like bad luck until the pattern became impossible to ignore. Monday morning, my main aerator pump seized up, motor burned out despite running perfectly for months. Tuesday, the backup system's electrical connections had somehow corroded overnight, despite being weatherproofed and recently installed. By Wednesday, I was looking at $4,200 in repair costs to maintain water quality that had taken months to achieve. The timing was surgical in its precision. Just as we were preparing for legal warfare, my life support systems were mysteriously failing. "Coincidences like this don't exist," Tom Martinez said, examining the burned-out motor with the kind of suspicion electricians develop after getting shocked too many times. "Somebody with electrical knowledge did this deliberately. These connections were cut, not corroded. I installed security cameras that weekend, hidden among the cattails like electronic deer hunters. Professional-grade equipment with night vision and remote monitoring. If someone was sabotaging my property, I'd catch them in the act." Saturday night at 2:17 a.m., the motion sensors triggered. Grainy infrared footage showed a figure in white clothing creeping around my aerator station with something that looked suspiciously like bolt cutters. The image quality was potato grade, but the silhouette and movement patterns screamed middle-aged woman trying to be stealthy and failing miserably. More importantly, security audio picked up the distinctive engine noise of a BMW X5 idling nearby, that particular purr of German engineering mixed with entitled rage that I'd learned to recognize from 50 yards away. Physical evidence sealed the case. Expensive garden glove dropped near the damaged equipment, still sporting a Nordstrom price tag and the kind of manicured perfection that belonged in country clubs, not equipment sabotage. DNA testing would have been overkill. This was Brenda's calling card written in designer stupidity. But while I was playing detective with security cameras, the real damage was happening behind closed doors. Our anonymous inside source reported growing chaos within Shasta Highlands HOA. "Emergency board meeting last night turned into a screaming match," they messaged through our encrypted channel. Two members demanded Brenda's immediate resignation. Legal costs hit $38,000 and climbing. She's telling people the lake lawsuit is essential for community protection, but nobody believes her anymore. The financial pressure was breaking her coalition from within. Residents who'd supported her environmental crusade suddenly cared more about their own money than abstract property disputes. Nothing destroys neighborhood solidarity faster than unexpected bills and deferred maintenance. Judge Brennan's legal contacts revealed Masterson Firm's billing strategy deliberately inflated hours designed to pressure quick settlement. Their standard operating procedure involved bleeding opponents dry with procedural delays and redundant motions, counting on financial exhaustion to achieve what evidence couldn't. Knowledge nugget that saved my sanity. Expensive lawyers often create more problems than they solve, especially when their billing strategy depends on prolonged conflict rather than actual resolution. But Brenda's desperation manifested in ways that went beyond simple sabotage. Local businesses started receiving anonymous complaints about environmental violations from operations that supported my lake restoration. The bait shop where Miguel bought supplies faced sudden inspection visits. Sarah's school district received accusations about inappropriate field trip destinations. The coordinated nature of these attacks revealed professional guidance. Masterson's firm wasn't just providing legal services, they were conducting a comprehensive harassment campaign designed to isolate me from community support. Media escalation became our saving grace. The Reading Record Searchlight ran a front-page story. HOA claims man's lake in property rights battle. Environmental groups rallied around successful restoration projects being threatened by legal technicalities. Social media exploded with #SaveDexLake hashtags and drone footage showing the dramatic transformation from toxic swamp to family paradise. Regional TV picked up the story as human interest gold-divorced electrician creates environmental miracle, gets attacked by neighborhood HOA queen with expensive lawyers. The visual contrast between crystal-clear water full of jumping fish and Brenda's scowling face in designer sunglasses made perfect television. Political interest followed media attention like vultures following roadkill. County Supervisor Williams called for investigation into property rights enforcement. State environmental groups cited my restoration as proof that individual action could succeed where government programs failed. But the most satisfying development was watching Brenda's public image crumble like a house built on quicksand. Neighbors who'd once respected her HOA leadership started asking uncomfortable questions about legal expenses and community priorities. Her real estate license faced ethics review for using professional connections to harass property owners. The smell of her cigarettes became a permanent fixture around my property line as she conducted surveillance missions from her BMW, engine running like a getaway car ready for escape. Stress was destroying her carefully maintained appearance. Makeup couldn't hide the hollow eyes and shaking hands of someone watching their world collapse in real time. Community solidarity grew stronger with every attack. Weekend volunteer work parties became social events. Local diners started serving Dex's Lake bass as daily special. Economic impact studies showed tourism revenue increasing throughout the region. For the first time since this war began, I wasn't just surviving Brenda's attacks, I was watching her destroy herself while building something beautiful from the wreckage. Watching Brenda self-destruct should have been satisfying, but cornered rats bite hardest when they're bleeding. Her final gambit arrived via overnight delivery, a coordinated smear campaign that would make political operatives jealous. She'd hired Whitman Public Relations, a Sacramento firm specializing in reputation management and crisis communications. Translation: professional character assassination for people with enough money to destroy their enemies without getting their own hands dirty. The attack launched simultaneously across multiple platforms like a digital D-Day invasion. Facebook ads targeting Shasta County residents portrayed me as an environmental criminal who'd illegally destroyed protected wetlands. Twitter bots amplified hashtags like #StopRomanoDestruction and #ProtectOurWaterways. Google searches for my name suddenly returned sponsored results about unauthorized development and tax evasion schemes. But the masterpiece was a professionally produced video that would have impressed Hollywood special effects artists. Aerial drone footage of my early restoration work, cleverly edited to look like ongoing environmental destruction. Muddy water shots from week 1 presented as current conditions. My dredging equipment portrayed as illegal mining operations. The narrator's voice carried that authoritative tone reserved for nature documentaries and political attack ads. Dex Romano has systematically destroyed 47 acres of pristine wetlands while evading environmental regulations and avoiding tax obligations. Local authorities are investigating this unprecedented ecological disaster. Fake testimonials from concerned citizens who didn't exist made the whole production feel legitimate to anyone who didn't know the truth. "I've lived here 30 years and never seen anything this devastating," claimed Margaret Thompson, whose stock photo smile had probably sold insurance policies and teeth-whitening products. The financial cost of this operation had to be astronomical. Professional video production, coordinated social media campaigns, Google ad purchases targeting specific demographics. Brenda was burning through HOA funds like a casino addict with someone else's credit cards. Counter-narrative preparation became our full-time job. Professional photographer documented current lake conditions with the kind of artistic precision usually reserved for magazine covers. Sarah organized expert testimony from biologists, hydrologists, and soil engineers who could explain restoration science in language judges and juries would understand. Character witnesses lined up like volunteers for a popular cause. Local business owners who'd watched weekend tourism increase. Contractors who'd witnessed the transformation from toxic waste to family paradise. Environmental groups who'd monitored water quality improvements that exceeded state standards. But the legal breakthrough came from discovery phase documents that revealed the true scope of Brenda's conspiracy. Internal communications between HOA board members, PR firm strategy sessions, and email chains with Masterson lawyers showed coordinated planning for what they called target elimination. One smoking gun email from Brenda to Whitman PR read, "Whatever it takes to discredit Romano. Budget is no object. Community survival depends on acquiring that property." The timestamp proved this campaign had been planned for weeks before any environmental concerns were publicly raised. Criminal implications became impossible to ignore. Organized harassment, conspiracy to commit fraud, potential RICO violations for using HOA funds to conduct personal vendettas. Judge Brennan's contacts in the district attorney's office started asking very pointed questions about organized criminal activity disguised as neighborhood governance. Community backlash against the smear campaign surprised everyone, including seasoned political operatives. Local residents recognized fake testimonials from people who'd never lived in Shasta County. Business owners who'd actually visited my lake started posting counter videos showing crystal clear water and healthy fish populations. Regional media investigated Whitman PR's history and discovered a pattern of controversial campaigns for developers, polluting industries, and politicians caught in corruption scandals. The firm's client list read like a who's who of environmental destroyers and corporate criminals. Political pressure reached state level when environmental organizations started demanding investigation into HOA abuse of authority. Property rights advocates cited my case as example of how neighborhood associations had become tools for harassment and theft. The most devastating blow came from an unexpected source: Shasta Highlands residents finally learning the truth about their HOA's financial management. Anonymous leak of board meeting recordings revealed years of deferred maintenance, mismanaged funds, and Brenda's personal use of community resources for legal vendettas. Emergency resident meeting called for following Tuesday drew 3 times normal attendance. Homeowners who'd supported environmental protection discovered their president had been lying about everything while spending their money on expensive lawyers and PR firms. Brenda's isolation became complete when her own board members publicly distanced themselves from her tactics. 2 resignations in protest, 1 formal censure, and a motion for no confidence vote scheduled for the following week. Personal relationships disintegrated as neighbors learned about surveillance missions, harassment campaigns, and financial mismanagement. Friends stopped returning calls. Real estate colleagues avoided her at professional meetings. Even her preferred coffee shop started finding excuses to be too busy for her morning visits. The smell of desperation replaced designer perfume as her daily cologne. Stress-induced chain smoking left permanent odors in her BMW. Makeup couldn't hide the hollow-eyed appearance of someone watching decades of social standing collapse in real time. Final confrontation was approaching whether she wanted it or not. Public meeting scheduled for Thursday evening, HOA Community Center, with enough angry residents to fill a football stadium and media coverage that would decide the war once and for all. Time to finish what she'd started. Thursday evening, 7 p.m., Shasta Highlands Community Center. 312 people crammed into a room designed for 150, with overflow crowds spilling into the parking lot where speakers had been hastily installed. The air conditioning gave up around 6:45, leaving the room thick with tension and the collective body heat of an angry mob. 2 TV crews set up cameras, while a newspaper reporter live tweeted the proceedings. Miguel Santos had organized carpools from 3 counties, bringing families who'd discovered fishing paradise at my lake. Sarah Chen arrived with a busload of biology students carrying water quality test results and environmental impact studies. The smell of nervous sweat mixed with industrial carpet cleaner and the lingering aroma of too many community meetings where nothing important ever happened. Tonight would be different. Brenda entered exactly 15 minutes late, flanked by her remaining lawyer Masterson firm had quietly withdrawn the day before, citing irreconcilable differences with client objectives. Her replacement looked like he'd graduated law school the previous Tuesday and learned property law from YouTube videos. She'd dressed for battle in a black business suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, but stress had hollowed out her cheeks and turned her signature blonde helmet into something that belonged in a natural disaster documentary. The confident tyrant from 8 months ago had been replaced by a cornered animal wearing designer armor. Her presentation lasted 12 minutes and felt like 12 hours. Charts about community water resources and environmental protection delivered in a voice that cracked twice and went shrill whenever someone in the audience shifted in their seats. Her claims about unauthorized development threatening neighborhood stability sounded ridiculous in a room full of people who'd actually seen my lake restoration. Scattered applause came from exactly 4 people, all Highlands residents who'd probably been threatened with HOA violations if they didn't show support. Judge Brennan took the microphone like a professor addressing freshman students who hadn't done their homework. He methodically destroyed her arguments using evidence so comprehensive that even her lawyer started taking notes. Ladies and gentlemen, we have here documented proof of a conspiracy to commit fraud. He displayed enlarged copies of internal HOA communications on the portable screen Tom Martinez had donated for the evening. Meeting minutes showing premeditated plans to acquire Mr. Romano's property. Financial records proving misuse of community funds. Email evidence of coordinated harassment campaigns. The crowd's murmur turned ugly when financial documents revealed HOA board members had approved $53,000 in legal consultation without resident notification. Swimming pool repairs had been postponed indefinitely, while Brenda hired Sacramento lawyers and professional PR firms to steal someone else's property. But the smoking gun moment came when Judge Brennan displayed Brenda's handwritten notes from 2019. Romano property acquisition target identified. Whatever it takes. The audible gasp from 300 people sounded like air being sucked from the room. Even her remaining supporters looked stunned by the premeditation evidence. Brenda's meltdown was spectacular and complete. "You people don't understand what's at stake here," she screamed into her microphone, causing feedback that made everyone wince. This community was built on certain values, certain standards that outsiders like Romano will never appreciate. The racial undertones weren't subtle. Comments about my foreign-sounding name and how I'd never really fit in with our neighborhood values turned the room's disapproval into active hostility. Even her lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the defendant's table. Martha Pine, all 78 years of her, stood up slowly and commanded absolute silence with the authority of someone who'd taught Sunday school for 50 years. "Brenda Kowalski, I watched your uncle build that lake in 1962. I've lived in this county longer than you've been breathing. And I'm here to tell everyone present that this isn't about property values or environmental protection. This is about a spoiled woman throwing a 60-year tantrum because she didn't get something she wanted." The standing ovation lasted 90 seconds and included everyone except Brenda and her uncomfortable lawyer. Sheriff's Deputy Martinez chose that moment to enter with official papers. "Mrs. Kowalski, you're being served with criminal referral documents. The district attorney's office is investigating charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, misuse of public funds, and organized harassment." Civil lawsuit papers followed immediately. "You're also being served with Mr. Romano's countersuit for $50,000 in damages, legal costs, and punitive penalties for frivolous litigation." The room erupted in cheers while Brenda stared at the papers like they were written in hieroglyphics. Local TV reporter stepped forward for the money shot. "Mrs. Kowalski, how do you respond to charges that you've spent community funds pursuing a personal vendetta against Mr. Romano?" Her response was storming toward the exit while shouting threats about not being finished with any of you people. The BMW's engine roared in the parking lot as she fled like a getaway driver escaping a bank robbery. The immediate aftermath was pure celebration. HOA board voted unanimously to remove Brenda as president and drop all claims against my property. Residents approved emergency resolution to reimburse my legal costs and formally apologize for their president's criminal behavior. Judge Brennan's closing statement summed up the evening perfectly. "This is what happens when bullies meet people who refuse to be bullied." 30 days after Brenda's spectacular public meltdown, the legal dust had settled into the sweetest victory I'd ever tasted. Court judgment came down like divine intervention wrapped in official letterhead. My ownership was confirmed permanently, all boundary disputes resolved, and every one of Brenda's claims dismissed with prejudiced legal language meaning, "Don't even think about trying this nonsense again." Financial settlement exceeded my wildest dreams. The HOA paid $38,000 in legal costs and damages, plus another $12,000 for property tax reimbursement dating back to my original purchase. Brenda personally coughed up $15,000 in punitive damages and court costs. Criminal charges hit her like a freight train carrying karma. Guilty plea to harassment and misuse of public funds, 18 months probation, and restitution payments that would keep her broke until the next presidential election. The restraining order meant she couldn't come within 500 yards of my property, not that she'd want to, considering what happened next. Her real estate license got revoked faster than a speeding ticket in a school zone. Business reputation destroyed, personal bankruptcy filed, and social exile from every respectable circle in Shasta County. The white BMW disappeared, replaced by a dented Honda that looked like it had given up on life. Ultimate irony, She was forced to sell her Highlands house to pay legal debts, moving to a studio apartment complex where she couldn't even be elected to organize a bake sale, much less terrorize property owners. Meanwhile, my lake became the crown jewel of Northern California's outdoor recreation scene. Weekend visitors hit 800 during peak summer months, with families driving from Sacramento, San Francisco, even Oregon to experience water so clean you could see bass swimming 20 feet down. Economic impact studies showed local businesses reporting 60% revenue increases during fishing season. Gas stations, restaurants, bait shops, even the ice cream truck that started making weekend rounds, everyone benefited from what started as one man's peace project. The Romano Lake Environmental Education Center opened 6 months later, funded by donations from visitors who wanted to preserve something beautiful for future generations. Annual scholarship program provides $5,000 for local students studying environmental science, water management, or renewable energy systems. Sarah Chen's biology classes became the most popular field trips in 3 counties. Kids who'd never seen clean water learned about ecosystem restoration, fish habitat management, and how individual action could heal environmental damage that government programs had ignored for decades. Conservation partnership with State Fish and Wildlife turned the lake into an official demonstration site for habitat restoration techniques. My restoration methods were being replicated throughout California, proving that private citizens could accomplish environmental miracles when bureaucracy got out of the way. Public access agreement guaranteed permanent community use with formal trails, fishing piers, and educational signage explaining the restoration process. What started as personal property had become a gift to everyone who valued clean water and healthy fish populations. But the most satisfying transformation was personal. The angry, divorced electrician who'd bought this property for solitude had become an accidental community leader, environmental advocate, and living proof that fighting for what's right sometimes creates something bigger than you ever imagined. Maria Gonzalez's daughter caught her first 5-pound bass on a sunny Saturday morning, squealing with excitement that echoed across water so clear it reflected clouds like a mirror. That moment reminded me why this fight had been worth every sleepless night and legal bill. New relationship with Martha Pine's niece, Rebecca, brought unexpected happiness to someone who'd given up on finding peace with another person. She taught environmental science in Reading, understood the value of clean water, and appreciated men who fought bullies instead of becoming them. Professional expansion into lake restoration consulting kept me busier than I'd ever been as an electrician. Property owners throughout Northern California wanted advice on water management, habitat restoration, and legal protection strategies. Fighting Brenda had accidentally launched a second career doing work that actually mattered. The grand reopening celebration drew over 1,000 people, including state officials, environmental groups, and media coverage that made my story a symbol for property rights victories everywhere. Cutting the ribbon with the same chainsaw from my opening scene felt like perfect bookkeeping for a story that started with trespassing signs and ended with community celebration. As sunset painted the water gold and children's laughter echoed across restored paradise, I realized something profound. Sometimes you don't choose the fight chooses you. And victory creates something more beautiful than you ever dreamed possible. Drop a comment with your own HOA horror story.